Hello and a warm welcome to Straight from the Heart, a podcast by Pragyan Advisory. I am Sunil Ganesh, your host. In the last several months, we have realized the importance of having focused and deep conversations. And taking a leaf out of the lessons learned, we have termed this new series as Conversations. In this series, we will get views and perspectives from leaders and experts on topics that are relevant in the space of leadership, teams, and culture. And as part of our conversations today, we have a very special guest, Vepati Rajkamal. Rajkamal heads human resources at Axis Bank, one of the largest private sector banks in India. A seasoned professional with nearly 20 years plus of experience, rich experience. Dear listeners, it's my pleasure to welcome Rajkamal in Conversations. Raj, welcome to Conversations.
Thank you, Sunil, for having me here. And I really look forward to enriching set of questions and a really engaging conversation.
Really appreciate that. And in fact, the topic that we had chosen for you and get your perspectives in is essentially the space of engagement and performance during times of crisis. Now, I'm sure it is now almost a beaten point, but the last 18 months were something that most of us were not essentially trained for. And a lot of us would have had our own learnings, challenges as we went through this whole journey. So what I would be very keen to start off is that as you look back at this period of 18 odd months that we all went through, what were the essential takeaways for you at a very high level? And then we will get on to the specific aspect of engagement and performance.
So, I think it's been talked enough. At a broad level, I would say the entire phase, especially the first time around when COVID hit us and the crisis came to bear. And let me explain that we are a regulated entity. We are essential services, right? So it was a little bit that much harder because given the fact that we're essential services, you had to keep it running. You had to keep your shop running. You had to keep your entire operations running and learn a new skill. But please understand, when we started off this entire crisis and everything in banking is codified, it was put under BCP, Business Continuity Plan, right? And you had the BCP committee. Unfortunately, for us, or maybe fortunately, BCP is episodic. You have floods, you have some climate related stuff or power outage, and then that's when it kicks in. And this wasn't episodic, like this didn't have an expiry date, right? It continued on and on and on. So we had to even kind of put the entire BCP up on its head. What does it mean, right? We had to be very clear that when do we enter and when do we exit out also, at what stage. And that was that later. We started very early, frankly speaking, as soon as we were getting in fact, as early as February, we had started at least discussing this. We are a regulated entity, don't have systems configured to work from home at all. March was all set up to do that. At a broad level, I think there were three things for me that stand out. And everybody talks about how IT guys set up, got desktops ferried, and I'm sure most of the companies had the similar challenge. Ops teams kind of came together and did process reengineering all at once to ensure that the operations house remains seamless. Our treasury guys also stepped up. And I'm sure every organization has similar stories. I think the part that we recognized and maybe helped out also, if I look back, that we were very clear getting in, we don't have the answers. And I think that humility is very, very critical. We don't have the answers. Hence, we will lean on each other to figure out, figure out options and possible scenarios. Second thing, we also went in and through the entire crisis, if we don't know the answers, people on the ground who are going through this have the answers, trust them, lean on them, right? Don't try to have a central command nerve center, which you do in a BCP scenario, right? Don't have that. And then that structure and the organization has to be empaneled. And it's critical because we don't think of structures, especially in crisis. We think of structures formalized. Oh, we know the answers. We will tell exactly what needs to be done. Very, very critical to also have supporting structures for you to say, okay, if I don't know the answers, how else could I? So you had the regional teams. We actually had 3 tracks, because for us the 3 things were: how do you keep the branch banking running? How do you keep operations, the back end running, operations, IT, etc. running, the treasury part, which is so regulated, that running. And all these 3 had 3 separate tracks. And under these 3, we also had regional and local people who kind of stepped up. And in any crisis, lean on each other, both horizontally and vertically, which is what we were saying. If you don't know the answers, have cross-function people. And once you assign them, don't double guess. The chain of command also needs to be very, very clear. And and the question was, what did you do? Really, I think we learned to be open. And here is where I think one is the BCP part of it. One of the things we also recognize as leaders, this was the first time that leaders had their own challenges when they were dealing with, yet manage the task part. Typically, you would say that you go get into a task, you're not yourself affected as much, right? Yeah. For the first phase, I think each one of us, remember the first phase was about nobody had a support system at home. The kids were at their house and everybody was stepping up in different ways, especially if you had partners who were working. So the entire family support, the cadence wasn't put through, right? You didn't know what to do. And you're perhaps also going through your own fears, deep anxieties, yet had to stand up, be around, and manage the engagement processes and the task processes. We also had to task. We couldn't afford to say, okay, this is slow down. Let's just hunker down and do the inward stuff. That was, so that energy, you had to sustain yourself to kind of, and leaders had to kind of draw in, maybe from each other, maybe from their own reservoirs of strength, and manage that. This was a big change to any other period that I saw. The second thing I saw is, and maybe everybody did that. We did it a little differently. Typically, you look at people above you for direction. And when you don't know the answers, how long will it last? We were thinking, some people were saying, and I remember early, I think late April, we released a document, when the office will open in June, we will open it with a certain cadence. And at that time, we said hybrid is early in April only. But we were so optimistic June, July, right? So the thing that also I recognize, and I think in hindsight, nobody has the answers up. So how do you draw the energies of especially the middle managers? And often in engagement processes, we forget that. So I think one of the ways that we did was when it was total shutdown, lockdown, etc. Central teams, we ensured that the work is an antidote. How do you manage crisis? For people to give purpose. Work is also a deep purpose thing. You don't not be coming to office. Please understand, we were not coming to office. There were new habits being learned, working from home. You were anyways going through stretch things. And that's the time we said, okay, this is a crisis time. Don't let it go waste. What are the new habits that you want to pick up in each of the streams, in each of the areas? Let's just reimagine, new branch of the future. Let's just reimagine HR, reshaped HR of the future. How customer service is going to happen. And through these processes and conversations, again, fear and fantasy are 2 things that hold human emotions, right? Fear of the present and fantasy of the future. And that's how I think human race is also energized with the concept of fantasy. Okay, the world is going to be a better place. And especially if rationally and cognitively you're thinking about it, I think that helped give purpose to what we are doing and what we are going through, and build that optimism and give the energy as well. And there are many rituals that I can talk about, but I think 2-3 things: have structures, get people to manage emotions, and please don't have the humility to say we may not know the answers. And you need to have processes and relationships to both lean horizontally and within your teams, and trust them, trust people. And second part is get your sandwiched layer, typically the middle managers, energize and create that so that the energy is also cascaded across.
Interesting, interesting. I think you touched upon so many interesting facets and wove them so very well. Typical Rajkamal that we have always known. It's really appreciated. I want to just pick on one or two themes that you mentioned, and I think that, and I think you spoke of humility, the importance of trust, and don't double guess. That's great. But you also touched upon during the phase the challenges that the leaders with themselves have experienced and faced. Uh, Tell me, how did this typical challenge really manifest? Because I'm sure they, as you said, lean on each other, get the strength from each other, drawing from your own internal resources. But that's all fine. But how did it all pan out on ground? And what were some of the real challenges that really faced as leaders themselves had to, if I may say, align and focus and be there for their people?
So if I look back at that time, and I'm just going to a time of first time COVID, because at the time it was a different challenge, and maybe I'll try to weave in both times, right? First time we didn't know the answers, and there were circulars coming every day. If somebody has come from any country abroad, you've got, and a person has been in touch, you've got to quarantine, and you needed to put the processes, right? You had to cascade guidelines continuously. Was super critical. And that's why the BCP team that we had formed, which had senior functionaries and a cross-functional team, was the sole communication channel. They were tasked with everything. They had been given powers, take decisions and move on. So that happened. So that at least provided a framework. But as one of the big takeaways of the entire crisis of 18 months, I won't say crisis, it's been just a, let's say, human experiment of a different kind. At a large scale. Work spilled over to our breakfast tables, our sofas, couches, beds, wherever. But emotions spilled over in the workplace. And you can't now shut them away. You can't shut them away. And I think that's and that's why I love the concept of conversations. Because once you recognize that emotions have spilled over to the workplace, you can't now go back to your anal self and just say, there are 5 goals to do. And maybe at initial stages when clarity is required, when you're grappling with a lot of fear and anxiety, I think very clear and sharp and being directive is the way to go. And I think leaders coped also by saying, okay, we've got this guideline, this direction, do these 5 things and do these 5 things alone for now. Right? But as they got comfortable, I think towards in the middle, people would ask, and then we had to also put guidelines to say, okay, ask about how they're feeling. If somebody's affected, what are the 3-4 things that you will do? You will be in touch through the period. And these are regular human habits, but you had to kind of show them, because sometimes, what happens when you're going through your own thing, we're so inward looking, we don't even think about these things. So you had to remind people, some rituals had to be reminded of people to do. And I think third is just having some conversation. Periodically, we would get people from the ground or people from the regional offices and people who are having their own challenges, talk about what they're doing, what are the things that they're facing, where do they need our support. Stuff like customers were coming in, or I think initially people had their own challenges. Of bereavement, of things happening in the family, not trapped. And that's where the human side of leaders and the organization needed to step up. And we did. I remember the story, and I think there was, because the schools had closed down, a lady talked about a branch head. For us, she's a senior leader, somebody who's on the ground. A single mother whose father had come over to manage her son because schools had closed down prior to the lockdown. And he had taken the son along to Indore. And I think her biggest challenge was, unfortunately, he was hospitalized. Mother was hospitalized, and there was nobody to manage the son. Stories like this are gut-wrenching. I don't know how that woman slept that night, and she was like, and she couldn't go. And we had to organize transport for her. And what I completely appreciate, and in gratitude, I tell you, when you appeal and people are all genuinely nice. I think all of us step
True.
up. All of us step up when help is required. The police department, we had to just call police guys and get the certificate, etc. done. And then just tell people we have your back, even for simple things. Like we would never have done this, I'm a banker kind of stickers, you're a social worker kind of stickers, or in the round 2, my team was just doing tracing and ensuring cylinders, vaccine cylinders, medicine procurement, hospital thing, not only for us, but for our associates. So you had to build a community. So that's the big thing. Manage crisis through a community. And in the community, you will have conversations. And unfortunately, one of the things I realized, Sunil, is all of us, we have this, there are ads like, retire early, do your thing, follow your own passion. Or people say, when I stop working, I will get into social service or something like that, not for profit sector. I think crisis taught us that in work or during work, we are doing the biggest service, not only to the bread earner who's coming to the office every day, but also to their families. That community feeling and the deepest service is what when you're at work. You really can't say that, I'll retire and do things. Think about you're impacting family of 4 or 6 or 7. The conversations are being heard, especially when workplace is spilled over. What you do and how you nurture the relationships, how do you task and frankly speaking, I think as I come back and say that work was the biggest antidote for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Also had sessions like stay positive, training sessions, but I'm just talking about what happens on a daily basis is what you do and what you can give as a biggest service thing. Some part of yourself as a leader, as a manager every day.
Interesting. In fact, you touched upon something that I was going to ask you, and thank you for leading us into that. So as a senior leader at Access, as you look back at this entire event and now with a view forward, were there certain beliefs or patterns of thinking or deeply held mental models that got fundamentally challenged? And on the other side, were there certain mental models, beliefs that got reinforced that this is what we should do? This is how we should be looking at it.
So first thing is, I think people may not acknowledge it, that emotions are in the workplace. You've got to be vulnerable. It's okay. It's okay not to be okay. Yeah, don't have the perfect role model. You can't walk around with a mask. And I'm not talking about authentic leader and all of that. I'm just saying there are good days, there are bad days. And it's okay not to be okay. Be okay with that. And sometimes it does help to share. One of the things that also happened during this thing is having a cadence of meetings, right? You have everybody picked out a habit. And there were meetings where people said, we're not feeling good today. Such a powerful emotion and the energy you would see suddenly, okay, it's okay not to be okay. Then it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to express yourself. And I think that's the biggest gift that we can give to the workplace as well. But I think this was one big trend I saw. So you need to be more human as we got more digital. Think about it.
Very well said.
So we're all talking about technology, digitization to keep bounds. Acceleration is happening. You see the kind of demand that is there for technology or tech talent, even in engineering or manufacturing companies. But that also is a result of this. But we can't forget, we as humans have a certain thing. We bring our soft skills, negotiation, conversation skills. So conversations are in vogue, I would say. That's one habit that we need to amplify a lot more. Third big thing that I would say is work doesn't mean coming to office. And that's a trend I've seen, cubicles or your office spaces of industrialized past will be there, but increasingly the flexibility, 30% or 40% of our guys, even now, want to operate out of their hometowns. And I think that's a trend I'm seeing. So hybrid working is here to stay. And there is definitely a move where people are saying, and I'm seeing people in skilled talent pool, moving to maybe having choices in terms of their employment content. So organizations have to be open towards that. But this part, that work is not equal to office, is a big one for manager. Especially our engagement happens with physical contact. Look, feel, see. How do you put your arm around the shoulder? On Teams, how do I do that? So you've got to rewire yourself. And so some managers have done it by putting cadence and doing tasking meetings and filling up the calendar. Some managers have, and I see that, do it nicely. They will do one-on-one catch-ups, have introducing certain other rituals to kind of replicate behaviors that they would have done in an offline mode. But this one, I would say, the fact that if I'm not coming physically, how do I engage? How do I coach? How do I mentor? That will again happen through conversations, is how I see. The next question was, what has definitely gotten reinforced, right? That was your question.
Correct. What has got reinforced?
The fact that we've got to be humble and deal with ambiguity, I think. And I think and maybe the question would be for me, certain behaviors of a leader, that some people who are open, who are agile, has gotten reinforced. Somebody who can have conversations with people and ignite the purpose. Why am I doing it? Not the how and the what that we often get focused on. Engagement doesn't happen with the agency theory. The person comes and knows what's in it for me kind of stuff. It's about building that community and having conversations to say, why do you matter? You matter because this. Those conversations are super useful, and that has definitely gotten reinforced. Second is, speed is critical, perfection may not be, I think, right? Especially when you're in uncertainty, and, uncertainty will remain. Skills will continue to have lesser half-lives. The life is going to get shorter and shorter. So speed is critical. Don't look for the perfect solution. That I think will be a critical one.
Interesting. So in the light of all these shifts that you spoke of, that work may not necessarily be now at the workplace, it could be from home or anywhere else. And if I may also add, the increasing digitization and of course the generations that are coming in, all that put together. And of course the learnings of what happened and how the so-called pandemic was dealt with. One of the things that when I have been having conversations with clients is that there are some who believe that it is the right time to relook at what they called as the model of leadership that is relevant for them. Do you think that this kind of a situation has also triggered a serious thought saying that, hold on, do we need to seriously relook at our so-called leadership templates, if I may put it that way? I don't want to bucket them into this, but at least this is what I look for in a leader in an organization, say like Axis. Has that got questioned? That has got challenged? What's your reflection on that?
So we embarked after this. One of the things that fallouts of entire COVID is maybe there were a couple of habits that we picked up. Definitely the hybrid working, right? Getting a manager playbook developed, and we're still in process of that, getting a manager playbook, especially as people have come back from October onwards. We're just still seeing how are people managing a hybrid workforce. Some people who come to office, some people who don't. And you're also coming to office and not. And we are looking at different kind of workers, etc. In that context, especially as things became uncertain, we kind of reassessing our leadership framework and how we develop leaders. I think for me, the biggest learning has been, please don't stick around to a template. The age of leadership competencies. So if you will, 7 competencies or 6 competencies or 3 competencies, perhaps shelf life also. Because, competence, what are competencies? Competencies work saying that, okay, these are differentiated skills, knowledge and attitude or behaviors that a high performer demonstrates, right? But that is in the context of today, not tomorrow. And when tomorrow is uncertain, were these competencies the same that you displayed? Because these were competencies that got displayed in office scenario when people were interacting, how you negotiate, how you influence. And maybe now when we realize the most effective negotiators are now not the sly hustlers or obvious hustlers, but the best influencers are those who have credible relationships, deep relationships, who have the ability to pick the phone and get the work done. Right? So the models of influence, collaboration, all of them are changing. So don't first of all stick to a template. I think that's the first thing. No template, dead. Second thing is define also who's a leader. Maybe, and I'm being a little controversial, I'm saying right now, especially with increased uncertainty, be very clear. It's okay to be a fantastic manager rather than trying to be an inefficient leader.
And why do you say that?
I'm just saying because there are tasks to be done. Even if you will develop expertise, when you have managerial tasks, you hunker down, the answer is known, etc. And I'm defining manager and leader as leader is really charting the path unknown, and this guy knows the stuff. Even if you develop 60-70% of your, like the middle managers do that, it's fine. That's the controversial stuff because, yes, there is an argument that mid managers, are they going to be required? You need to look at them differently. But I think, especially in change, they are the transformation leaders. They've got to co-opt and manage the change process. So align them on the process. So you build that managerial expertise to drive that change process. That's where I'm saying. So be very clear, where are you spending your energies on? And in the same breath, I will say leaders are those who who are aligned to the strategy and manage to get it done. Right? Even in the wake of this uncertainty. When you don't know regulatory, there are lots of changes. Like in asset, every day pretty much we were getting so many new circulars, or the customers weren't coming to the branch, but you had to open your branch. How do you manage to keep yourself relevant, right? These things were recognized, and increasingly with digitization, are customers coming to the branch? Not really. So what do you do? So we might kind of get an outbound call center guys to train the branch staff to say, how do you call the customer? Say, I'm around. Don't ask for business. I'm around. Like this, insights from the fringes and innovation at the fringes will only happen if you are saying, I'm aligned to the strategy, and saying, how do I repurpose and remain relevant all the time? So that's the second thing, which is what you define as leaders. Leadership is, for me, being aligned to the goal, being to the strategic visions and the strategic imperatives, right? In that strategic imperatives, how do you display your learning agility? See, most of us, and I'm again saying, all of us will recognize that maybe 60% of the jobs that we do may be efficient, 40% is inefficient. And maybe I'll also go to say 60% if 60% is efficient, or what we do is efficient, maybe we have only 60% job to be done, in a sense, if we take a work week. In that 40%, what do? Do you look at BAU, run the show kind of stuff, or are you looking at thinking about the next thing? How are you looking at yourself? Are you looking at learning your new skill? Are you looking at challenging and setting a different performance standard? Those are critical. Leadership traits wise. Are you someone who gets fixated on certain tasks and certain goals and here and now so much that you're not able to get a balcony view and see what's happening? And that balcony view is super, super critical right now. And I think the third thing I would say leaders will need to do is be a little bit more inclusive. That is going to be a differentiated thing. Being inclusive, working with you. First of all, you should also be saying that I don't have a template. If you don't have a template, how can you imagine that people will have a template or they'll have clones of you? And agility, being very, very learning agile.
Interesting. So since you touched upon that aspect of inclusion, and if I were to now look ahead, saying that, okay, in light of all that, now there seems to be a view that the economy is now moving up. The so-called pressures and stresses arising out of COVID is also dampening down with vaccinations not coming in. I'm sure performance and expectations of performance is not going to go anywhere. It's likely to increase and increase significantly. And on top of that, as you mentioned, that engagement will happen at a very different level, considering the context and the ways in which people will be working together on this. So as you look ahead into this entire journey of engagement and the standards of performance, what do you think will be some of the new challenges that leaders will have to prepare, and therefore this aspect of inclusion? So how will inclusion be that differentiator for them to maybe take this forward and address it?
I think in most organizations, Sunil, recognize that a performance review system could be strengthened. Yeah. In a lot of places, it's a tick box activity. Even if I have a conversation, it's a tick box activity. The why and the how needs to be strengthened a lot more. And what is engagement? One of the things that people often say, ask leaders, what do you do very well? I'm very good at motivating. And the question that I ask is, how do you motivate? How do you personally get motivated? With somebody, or you work because you want to do? Most often than not, they'll say, because I want to do, right? Internal motivation, right? That's what spurs us. And then maybe the penny drops saying that, what do you do? When you say motivation, it's about communication. 20 times a day, you repeat the stuff. Is engagement? Helping people figure out how do they, maybe, one of the paradoxes is people get engaged, people are more engaged not when they are fully competent, when they feel they are fully competent. You know what I mean? You need to get people, all of our team members, to feel competent, capable. I can solve this. And you're in that journey. And that discovery of feeling competent and achieving mastery is the zone of engagement.
Very insightful. Very insightful. And in your view, how would organizations do? Sorry, I'm interjecting because I don't want to lose this. And how would you suggest that leaders across levels do that?
If only I had the answer, I would write a book, it'll become a bestseller. But I think
maybe we could start with a blog. I think that will also be very, very interesting, because this is a very interesting point you touched, and therefore I don't want to lose that thought. So
I think first fundamentally conversations, and crystal gazing with people, and maybe building scenario A, B, C. What is competence? Competence is knowing the answers like a straight line. There's a question, there is a definitive answer. But most of the times we also are able to, we do tasks which is where maybe the answers are not known, like reducing attrition. Attrition by 20%, right? Abhi kaise karoge? You can't have like we are living in a multivariable world, right? So one is that conversations. I think the role of the leader is also, my opinion, is framing the right question. Framing the right question and elevating, not giving assertions, do this, do that. But framing the right questions and helping them in the discovery of answer. And I'm just saying it's a little abstract, but that's the way to go. But I think more importantly, before you do that, I think establish a space of trust. So we did a lot of work this year along with leadership work. We are doing just these mentoring conversations. I can't tell you the biggest, I think, biggest beneficiary is not the mentee, but the mentor. You're having space, having conversations with diverse set of people, and you're doing it in a cadence, because a lot of us said, oh, will it work? You're doing online, you're not doing physically. But believe you me, at least for me personally, the fact that I'm meeting diverse set of people with different issues, and it's helping me reassess where am I? How would I handle it? So the mentee is helping me. I think that's where the openness could be there. Have the space for conversations with people. Figure out who you are. Build that trust before you drive into the main tumhe karunga. Like, otherwise, if you reduce the task to saying, Kal mein, you do this and you'll get the best rating. You're not making them feel competent, and time after time, and I ask my, my team, or I ask people around me, okay, why does a high performer, what are the habits of a high performer? The only habits of high performers I've seen across levels are, they are in control, not of the answers, but they are in control. They have certain habits, rituals where they know, acha, ye plan A nahi hai, to plan B hai, plan B nahi, to plan C, and the team is also in control. And that's the beauty. And I don't know how to codify it and kind of spread it out. How do you be in control with plan A, plan B, plan C? But I think in all of this, just long and short of it, create a space, have conversations, have the trust, who am I, who are you, all of that as managers, as people, and establish that. Second is ask questions. Frame the right questions, not assertions. And third is help the person discover plan A, plan B, plan C, and it's okay to fail. I know it's very easy for me to say, oh, it's okay to fail, but failure has a cost. But failure has an advantage of learning, but huge cost. So how do you, work that balance out? It's an interesting one.
Interesting. I think this is very pertinent, and I think you've left me thinking in terms of how does one crack this code. So the idea of writing a book, or maybe at least start with an article, please do seriously think about it, because this is something that would be great. I'll now be more or less coming towards the end of this particular piece. I have just one, and it's more of a, if I may articulate in the fashion that a certain aspect of fear that I may have is, and this may be me, but I'll still ask you. One of the fears that I have is that the 18 months, etc., has been a situation which was never experienced. So we brought in the behaviors that we felt were necessary to overcome this particular situation. It may not necessarily have got fully embedded in us and become part of us and become one with us. And therefore, the fear that I have is that as situation now stabilizes, improves, and normalcy in that sense is restored, we may slip back to behaviors that we were always very comfortable with. My question to you is, considering yours is a large 86,000 odd people organization, how do you ensure that some of these learnings, experiences don't dilute and fade away, but they become enriched the way Axis Bank is, or as the organization is today and in the times to come? What's your thought?
Sunil, I think there's no simple answer to this, right? And there is a tone at the top that needs to be set. Maybe the leaders also have to lead and talk about habits and weed out bad habits. Like doing meetings, and one of the worst habits that people picked up is doing meetings after meetings after meetings. And then you realize these meetings have just become bloated and efficient and all of that. So you've got to be like sensible about it. In physical space, meeting room could accommodate 6-7 people. Now it's 85,000 people. 85,000 people can't be in a meeting and take decisions, right? You are just, as I said, being seduced by form of a meeting. And then you're not equal to meetings, right? Meetings is not work. Okay. That's tone at the top, etc. is very, very critical. But I think in all of this, we focus so much on leadership, right? Leadership, and I'm saying leaders as this big hero, upar wala leader, but I think the community of leaders is the concept that I would say is critical, who need to nudge each other and look at each other and say, things are working, not working, and so then you can nudge it up. But the third important aspect in all of this is we forget the middle managers. They are super, 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 super crucial for propagation of habits or for even coming back to equilibrium. I don't think we will be completely come back, because this is a tectonic shift that's happened. And that's the reason you would see this. And I think at some level, the resignation at the middle levels, where people have also reassessed their life goals and they've had a tough time. 18 months hasn't been easy. You're seeing some people saying, is it worth it? Should I do something else? Should I scale down? No, they're going through the personal part is also out there, and organizations have to recognize that. Maybe I'll have to plug another thing, well-being. I think is a thing that leaders need to watch out for. It's real. I think it's real what people have gone through. Talking about it openly, being vulnerable is a crucial part. But yeah, how do you enlist the army of mid-managers and get them to be leaders and say what works, what doesn't work? And let's also be the conscience keepers that we don't go back. And fundamentally, I think in all of the crises, one thing that people don't do often is talk about the core stuff, the culture stuff, the value stuff. Who are we? Whether you're working virtually or whether you're working in offices, certain things should remain everlasting, right? Having conversations on things that matter in organizations would also perhaps counter this entire habits, because they're not like, it's not like, how do I say, we're working on 7 different things or 8 different platforms, right? This, even if one ball comes back, there's another thing that is pushing us forward. Maybe I deeply believe the entire performance engagement philosophy comes with the goals and goal alignment. Alignment is such a secret sauce, and alignment to not only the goal, but also the cultural fabric, etc. How do you kind of be the legacy carrier and have conversations and stories around it? Frequent communication. I think one thing that it's come out, efficient communication and inefficient communication, but communication nevertheless. There was a webinar fit, so people were doing cookery classes and all of that. I don't know whether personally, like, I don't know whether that engages. That can be just a I know it's a podcast, I can't use the term, but it could be just a relief item. But it's not an engagement item, if you will. Right? But some communication, why you matter, why this matters. So, there is a Ikagai, right? The purpose part. You need to figure out who you are, what you love, and what the world needs in that sense. 3-4 questions that are there. Maybe those are the questions that periodically the manager should ask. Why you matter. It's very critical right now in this time.
Interesting. So we can carry on and go on this conversation for long, but I know in the interest of time as well. One last question, Raj, and this is for you, and it's about you. In times like these, and as you touched upon, that leaders were expected to also be there, leading the troops from the front, with answers, without answers, being clear, not clear. How have you dealt with this entire piece? Because I'm sure people would have been looking up to you for answers, clarity, guidance. What has been your source of energy and sustenance during this period?
I think a little bit of rewiring. One is personal habits. I exercise. I hate running. And I get up in the morning, but I would read and getting out of the digital stuff, right? Keeping myself away from that, spending a bit of time to have some habits for myself, like get meditation or some exercise. I started doing that. Huge help. I think just focused on having a little bit of silence within ourselves and boredom within yourself is really critical. I think that for me worked. Second thing that worked is like, Sunil, you know me, I'm not such a planned, organized, structured person. In the conversation also, you see, I flow. But trying to curb that flow also helped me, because having a cadence, planned meetings, every morning I set up meetings. And I would periodically, I would ask for feedback. Should we continue the meetings or not? And there would be people saying, no. Now I'm happy at least 70-80% people say, no, we should continue, because this is such a great way of having conversations. And in at least with my team, third thing is the Monday mornings or some days I said, I'm not feeling good. I would say that openly. Or I said, simple questions of what did you do on the weekend? What's happening? Having some conversation around that. was perhaps my own way of consciously, unconsciously replicating what you do at office, the banter that you do at office. Some rituals got adopted, some rituals fell by the wayside. But yeah, also developing a hobby. I took to gardening or plants, or people did singing, others have something that anchors you and says, you are also learning as a human and becoming better. And I think as you grow older, you value friends that you have. Make them, nurture them, nourish them, because they nourish your soul also, and the community around you nourishes your soul. So there's no greater, I think, balm or medicine than just being human, than having conversations, trading stories, and being yourself. It helps you, maybe, helps you figure out to work the next day with more vigor, why you matter, why what you do is so critical, and all the emotions that you may have, channelize them properly, and help people realize their potential and help them thrive in a new world.
Wow. Great. Really. I think it has been quite an energizing. And I know you would have been noticing that I was taking down some points, because some of these were so very true, relevant, not academic, not abstract, but fairly concrete enough for others to also replicate. So really appreciate Raj taking time out and having this conversation with us. I'm sure our listeners would be immensely benefiting from this, the insights that you have shared, the suggestions, the ideas that you shared, and that they will be able to apply it and use it as well. So really thanks a lot from Pragyan for being part of the series called Conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much.